gamers, Matt Lemke here with your gamer goggles, and this is my third episode of Roleplay Ramblings, where I semi-coherently talk about a role-playing topic. Today's topic is storytelling related, and it's largely about what a GM can or cannot do or should not do, however you want to take that spin, when all of your hard work just kind of goes down the drain. For example, you've got this campaign running and your players just decided that in the first meeting of your villain that, well, you didn't want to be the last meeting, they ended his life. Now there are a lot of other things that can happen that they can ruin your story. They can find something too early. They can maybe not find clues. But for today's episode, we're going to primarily focus on examples of what happens when your villain has died too early or just somehow been written out of your script by your players. So, in order to do this, I think there are certain ground rules that kind of need to be set. One, we're assuming that your villain is dead or totally removed from the script in such a way that it doesn't really make much sense to keep him alive. Now, after that, rule number 2 would be, well, they won, or did they? Because there's a lot of things that you can do as a storyteller to fix that. Rule number 3 is, remember, it's not about your ego, it's about having fun. So, yeah, they may have beat you, but they didn't really beat you because it's still your story, and you can shape it any way you want, really. So, remember that the players should be rewarded for that, basically. Now, in the event that your players have done a super job in killing them, they do something super creative that you just couldn't have foreseen, or they get super lucky, like in the case of Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 or Pathfinder, the rogue comes in and manages to get a super powerful backstab off that just ruins your day. Or maybe the ranger sees something that is volatile and he shoots an arrow at it and he manages to make it explode, and it pretty much ends the villain's day. There are a lot of different options you can do here. And these are all options that I have used and I've had good success with, not just once, sometimes more than once. So, obviously option number 1 is reward the players, which, because they did a good job, they should always be rewarded. Don't fall into the trap of being upset and downgrade their accomplishment. I have done that before in this situation, and it never works out for the best. So, first option is just let the villain be dead. It's that simple. They did their job, they killed them. If you put a ton of work into your villain, well, then there's other options. You can bring him back as an identical twin. I have done this in the past, and I cannot remember the characters' names from G.I. Joe. Back in high school, I used the 2 twins. I want to say they were Remus and Romulus, but that's not right. I'm sure that's not right. But I did play it up that they felt each other's pain, and just like they did in the comic book, or the cartoon in this case. I framed it after the cartoon. And I had a lot of fun playing those guys as characters, or as NPCs. And my players, well, maybe because they were young, it took them a little bit of time to figure it out, but once they figured it out and they saw the guy was kind of like, he was maimed and he was in a sling and stuff, but what really took them as for surprise was the fact that the brother they killed was a fighter type, and the brother that was still alive was a sorcerer. So when they came around to dealing with the sorcerer, they had their hands a little bit more full because they actually ended up meeting him at a much higher level. That was my first idea. That was the very first time I ever had to do anything like that. Of course, you could play it up. You know, they do this in Hollywood all the time. The villain just escapes and comes back at a later date. I think in role-playing, you can probably pull this off. I don't think you can do it as easily in a novel. I think with role-playing, with the interaction of players and the interaction of the GM and their storyline, I think you're kind of one step closer to Hollywood than writing a novel. So I think doing Hollywood type of effects of pulling people back all the time is highly possible. This is not a character, but in a sense it is. In Burn Notice, it got to be a thing where every year they blew up Michael Weston's car. And it was always back for the next season. So there's no reason why you can't find a way. I mean, you just have to be able to explain it. In the case of, the Ranger blowing up something that's volatile, maybe the villain ducked into an alcove and was protected or whatever. You don't necessarily have to explain it to your players, but they might wonder how and why, so you should be prepared to have some sort of an explanation for them, because if you don't, they might feel cheated. That was my experience. It took me a little bit to come up with the explanation, and once I came up with the explanation, they were all relaxed on it, and we're okay. Now, the rest of these, for the most part, are Phoenix type of transformations. And these can be a lot of fun, but they can also be very dangerous. So when I say Phoenix-like transformations, one of the easiest things to do is bring your villain back as some kind of intelligent undead. A lich. I've brought characters back as zombies that had some intelligence. Raised dead or reincarnated could work too. My favorite one that I've done in the past was a ghost, and at that point in time, he was no longer the major villain, but they got into this fight in we'll call it his office, and the villain was his name was Nebazar, and he died tragically, and he was, when I say tragically, they overkilled him too by 75 hit points with their hit. So he was really just dead. So I played it up that he haunted a scabbard, and one of the players took that weapon and started using the weapon. So it wasn't a cursed item, it wasn't a magical item, well, it was already a magical item, but it wasn't cursed in a sense. So I had a lot of fun with the ghost whenever the ghost wanted to be malevolent, and they would draw the dagger out to fight, the ghost would come out, or when they were trying to negotiate and it didn't fit Nebazar's end game, which the players were still trying to finish up in the party, he would come out and do things to try and influence people to not be on the side of this party, because he was trying to make them feel like they were haunted. And I had so much fun with that. It took them a long, long time to figure out that they could kill the ghost. But anyway, you can have a lot of fun with transforming your dead villain into something else. There's a lot of templates out there that allow you to do this fairly easily. The ghost template was not the strongest template to use, but it was fun. Taking a dead character and turning them into a lich, if they're of the right class type or have the right background, is a great way to bring back the villain. It's even greater if you turn around and you make it as, and I shouldn't spoil this for some of the groups that I'm playing with right now, but you make it that the party killing them was actually part of the villain's plan. And so they were actually part of making the lich come to life, or unlife. So you can have a lot of fun with it, and especially if you can plant the right clues to let them know that they were responsible for bringing this evil into the world. Yeah, it's morning coffee. I'm still waking up. Now, this next one, applies to whether or not you're going to go into multiple storylines with your campaign. I have only done this once, and I think I only managed to do it semi-successfully because we haven't finished the storyline yet. The character, or the NPC villain, became a deity. And then as the players started to form and go on down the alliance, they realized this, they finished their goal, but now other parties are coming in, and the deity is a villain that goes from storyline to storyline, influencing other villains. And he's a major part of several storylines now, past, present, and future. So you could have a lot of fun with that, and it's a way to make a character that you have, for lack of a better way to say it, fallen in love with, that you spend a lot of time in, being fundamental to your storyline for multiple campaigns. Now, there is one other option. Not necessarily one other option. It is another option. You could just play it up that the villain was never really the villain, which is kind of like cheating yourself, but your players still get the reward for dealing with him and things like that. And he was just really a henchman working for the major villain. But then you got to go back through all the work of making a new major villain when you've already done it. So you can use the video game mini boss, big boss concept for what happened to your villain and work other villains in. Now, there are some other things that we can talk about briefly here when you just get to this point of, well, my players are kind of stuck and they're not finding things. So, let's say, and this is no longer they killed your villain too early. This is just other things that you can run into where you might have to think outside the box. And these are just going to be real quick ideas. So, you have your players are not finding the clues properly, not realizing they're the clues, or they are, they have them and they're not acting on them, per se. So, what do you do in these situations? For a long, long time, I found these situations to be very frustrating. So, you can have a player or multiple players have a dream that's very similar. This takes a little bit of work on your part because I find it's easiest to write the dreams out and just hand it to the players and let them read them. The hard part is getting them to share the dream with the rest of the party, especially if your party is relatively new in getting together. One thing that I have started to use a lot more in my games is a rumor mill. And you can have all these different rumors. When my players get a little bit stuck, I take the rumor mill and I concentrate it a little bit more towards the direction they should be going. So it might not be the perfect direction, but I definitely put it in a direction where I can replant clues easily and kind of get them back on track. So somebody might, taking real quick from taking from the Dungeons and Dragons themes of online gaming. Oh, I go here, I get a job, and I have to go clean out this guy's basement or wine cellar because it's full of rats. And while you're down there, you discover a door to the Thieves Guild or whatever, and then within the Thieves Guild, you find some very important clues as to getting back on storyline. That type of thing. For clerics, war priests type of people, maybe even druids, some kind of a prayer or a meditation. And meditation actually works really well with elves. The idea can come to them while they're meditating. So there's tons and tons of ways that you can put people back on track. Another real good one is somebody's going back over researching stuff because your players feel they're stuck. When a player picks up one of the objects, they get hit with a vision. So it's like an object read. And they just get hit with it. You don't need necessarily to explain it. Maybe it's size, they might wonder why. And it's fine because, it's a fantasy world and things like that happen in fantasy worlds and in stories. And you don't necessarily need to explain every single thing. So an object read is a great way to put people back on track, especially if it's one of the clues that you had dropped previously. Now, this one I actually took from Skyrim, and it works really well because when you're out in the middle of the wilderness and a courier runs up to you and hands you a piece of paper telling you where to go, they usually understand that they're going in the wrong direction. And that does. It comes right out of Skyrim with the dragon marks. And there's nothing wrong in your telling your stories with taking ideas and putting your own spin on them. I mean, that's pretty much what writing is anymore anyway. When I was in high school, my creative writing teacher, Carrie Fisher, said that... Carrie Fisher. No, see, I'm thinking of Star Wars. Kathy Fisher. Said that basically as a writer, you have to retell stories. And the trick to that is putting your personality into it and our understanding of the modern world, like, you know, Romeo and Juliet's been retold X amount of times and things of that nature. So those are some of the tips I use when my villains kind of die, or when my players get stuck in doing things that aren't necessarily helping them stay focused. When you do something like Rise of the Rune Lords, or some of the more basic adventure paths from Pathfinder, or the older modules from Dungeons and Dragons, it's a little bit harder to cover some of these things up because they're not your creations, but you can make it work. So, thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook. That's where I do a lot of my updates. Real soon I'm going to start doing my Kickstarter for Season 5. And it's going to be very different than it was from last year, so I hope you guys take a look at it. It's going to revolve largely around things like Roleplay Ramblings. I mean, it's not the world's greatest hit, but more people are liking it than disliking it, and a higher percentage of liking it than of the views. So I'm looking forward to doing more of it next year. I'm thinking about maybe world building. And I have to thank Owen Stevens and Ryan Hale for taking a look at my notes and maybe saying, hey, what about this idea and this concept and things like that, because they really did make Roleplay Ramblings a better show this year. And things like Roleplay Ramblings did come out on my Kickstarter, so please check it out. It'll be going up probably the week of Thanksgiving. Thanks for watching and have a good day.